Well, here we are with another Prophecy Pros podcast. Jeff Kinley along with Todd Hampson. And listen, we are here because of Harvest House Publishers and the resources that they invest in helping bring to you these podcasts every week. And I don't know how many hundreds of podcasts we have now, Todd, but a bunch.
A bunch.
And but you can watch those and listen to those on YouTube and also on our website, which is, what is our website again, Todd?
ProphecyProsPodcast.com.
See how simple that was? That was easy to get to, right? But we're so thankful to be here because we're going through a series right now called The Key Players of the End Times. And we've already covered some incredibly great scriptures and deep characters of the end times. And we talked about the two witnesses. We talked about the earth dwellers, or those who dwell on the earth. And we've talked about the 144,000. And Todd, we're going to turn our attention today to a very interesting group that we're calling the 10 Kings.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an amazing group of people because this entity represents sort of the hub around which much of the end times narrative revolves, does it not?
Yeah, it really does. You know, when we first discovered them in Daniel 2, Daniel, the book of Daniel is the revelation of the Old Testament. One reason Revelation trips people up is because they're not familiar with Daniel. So
Sure.
we'll start in Daniel, and this is where we first learn of this prophecy of an end times configuration. Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. Daniel interprets it for him, and basically it's 4 successive world empires. We've done a couple podcasts on that. But then the end times configuration is you get down to the feet of the statue, and it's a revived Roman Empire because it's tied directly to the iron legs, which represent the split kingdom of the Roman Empire.
Yep.
But you find this loose conglomeration of clay and iron in the feet, and then you have these 10 toes. So what's up with these 10 toes?
Well, I love this about Daniel, because in Daniel, he actually interprets the prophecy for us.
Thank goodness.
I know. It's incredible. He says in verse chapter 2, Daniel, in verse 40, it says, "Then there will be a 4th kingdom as strong as iron, and as much as iron crushes and shatters all things, so like that which breaks in pieces, it will crush and break all these in pieces." And it says, "And in that you saw the feet and the toes, partly of potter's clay, partly of iron. It will be a divided kingdom that will have the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw iron mixed with clay." And so, originally we find out that there's going to be a loosely held conglomeration of these 10 kings, these 10 kingdoms. And in verses 36 and 37, he tells us that Daniel actually gives the interpretation of the dream itself, and this refers to, on a broader thing, before we get more specifically into this, is that more broadly to the times of the Gentiles, which really begins with Babylon and goes all the way through the time of Antichrist kingdom. And so for that reason, they're obviously worth studying here.
Yeah, so true. And that those proved to be accurate prophetically. We know from the Dead Sea Scrolls that Daniel was written long before 150 to 200 BC because of the Dead Sea Scrolls. He was obviously there as a captive in Babylon. He was one of the exilic prophets, and after Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon was the Medo-Persians, and then the Greeks took over that, and then the Roman Empire. Each empire in succession took over the same area, grew in size, but always had its hub right there. And also when you go through that statue, the metals get denser but less valuable as they go down. So there's a lot of things tied into that. But the key thing to point out there is that the last one is the iron. And in Daniel chapter 7, we see that last empire as a beast.
Right.
So that's another important thing. It's a vicious, brutal, grinding kind of an empire, which the Roman Empire was.
That's right.
And apparently there's this, and we know from Daniel 9 and a few other places, there's the mysterious gap period, but it really appears that there'll be this revived Roman Empire in the 2 feet, but it'll be a little bit different. Like
Yeah.
you said, it'll have clay mixed with
Hmm.
iron. So, and people speculate,
Hmm.
kind of some wild speculations about that a
Yeah.
little bit, but we're going to try to see what scripture actually informs
Yeah.
us about those things.
Yeah. And now when we get to this prophecy, which is a parallel prophecy in Daniel 7,
Hmm.
that Daniel has about the beasts, he goes into the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom, and he says it will devour the whole earth, trample down and crush it, like we saw with the Roman Empire. Then it says, as for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom, 10 kings will arise.
Mm.
So this is where we get the idea of it being 10 personified individuals. So these are not just evil thoughts. These are not just corporations. It's not Amazon and Google and these are actual men. These
Yes.
are 10 kings that will rule. And if you consider the parallel and the outgrowth of the Roman Empire, Todd, it makes sense that these would be men who have rulership over geographical areas
Hmm.
on the planet. Now, the debate, some of the debate comes into as to how the whole world is going to be a part of this. Now, we do know some nations will oppose
Hmm.
Antichrist during that time, but there's been speculation of what about the United States? Where are we in all this?
Hmm.
Where do we fit in? Well, if you consider the impact of the rapture, which I do a deep dive into that in my book, The End of America,
Hmm.
published by Harvest House, and it's amazing to consider the dramatic, catastrophic impact of the rapture, specifically on America. I believe it'll affect the whole world, but America in particular. And so it is possible, just like in other times of history where nations have had to come together to support one another, that the Americas, maybe from Canada all the way through America and Latin America down to South America, could be conglomerated into one nation, maybe
Hmm.
called the Americas. Maybe that is a region over which one of the kings reign. We don't know that for sure, but we do know the fact that there will be 10 kings. There will be allotted areas of rulership, and that they will work together with Antichrist.
Yeah, that's really neat. As you were saying that, when you were kind of comparing Daniel 2 with Daniel 7,
Hmm.
there's this concept that we talk about in terms of interpreting Bible prophecy
Yeah.
or any theology, really. It's
Mhm.
progressive revelation.
That's right. Yeah.
And here we have an example of that
Hmm.
within the same book.
Hmm.
Daniel 2, he has this, interprets this vision of the 10 toes,
Yeah.
but doesn't really unpack the importance of
Yeah.
those 10 toes. But then you go forward just a couple chapters, and he specifically, and it's another vision, 10 horns.
Yeah.
And he says those 10 horns
Mhm.
represent 10 kings.
Yeah.
And I like what you said too about, because one question I did,
Hmm.
well, two, but we'll get to the other one in a minute. But one is, um, do the kings, are they just elite rulers? Are they necessarily kings over a region,
Mhm.
or are they, for example, a technocrat or
Mhm.
a technology guy or some kind of a ruler that has influence over another sphere of
Mhm.
life? But when you look at the context of Daniel, it really, all throughout it, when it's talking about various kingdoms, it's always attached to a geographical area,
That's right. Yeah.
whether it's Daniel 2 or Daniel 7.
Mhm.
There's really no indication that it's some other type of ruler. And as we mentioned, it does appear to come out of this revived Roman Empire.
Right.
So it seems to me they're going to be 10 kings somewhere in the revived
Right.
Roman Empire. But oddly enough, it will be a global government.
Mhm.
And to relate to what you said, in, I think it was 1968 or 1970, the Club of Rome
Mhm.
literally has a document where they split up the world, and you can look this up on the internet, into 10 specific regions.
It's amazing.
So why 10?
Yeah. Why? Yeah.
Why 10? If nothing else, it's an indication that the groundwork's being set, the mindset is
It
there,
is. Yeah.
and that we're close to that time because people are thinking, or
Yeah.
maybe Satan's influencing them to
Mhm.
think 10 regions.
That's
Let's
right.
get this going.
Yeah. Satan is very territorial. And we know Satan has schemes.
Yes.
We know he uses technology and all these other things. But you know, you don't really have to play a guessing game on this thing because Satan has always been territorial. These are all these nations that are mentioned in Nebuchadnezzar's vision are geographic regions or geographic areas. Okay.
Hmm.
And then when he talks about, and then the statue doesn't become something else. The statue is still the statue. And each area of the statue in Daniel 2 represents a geographical region. So it makes logical sense
Hmm.
to assume, and it does say kings here, to assume that because kings in this context rule, they don't rule over technology, they rule over regions and
Hmm.
people groups in geographical areas. The other thing too, the problem with that, I think too, is interpreting it as, well, this will be, satellites, this will be technology and stuff.
Hmm.
Is that, Todd? I think it's reversing hermeneutics. I think it's taking what we see happening in the world and then pushing that into the Bible
Yeah.
rather than letting the Bible speak for itself. Now, there will be, I'm sure, technology will be used and all these things, satellites and all these other things. That's fine. But what does the Bible say here? And it specifically says there are 10 kings. It also says that there are over 10 kingdoms. And it
Hmm.
says this in verse 44, in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed and will put an end to those kingdoms.
Hmm.
So it's, again, Satan, the whole context of the end times is Satan taking back geography and taking back humanity. And he's making claim to it. It's this claim that Jesus made by taking the little scroll in Revelation 5. It's Satan taking the kingdoms, plural, of the world and bringing them into one kingdom in Revelation 13 and 17. So to me, it makes more sense to see them as specific kings, excuse me, ruling
Hmm.
over specific regions,
Reeling and rolling.
reeling and ruling and reveling in their
That's
ruling
right.
over these specific kingdoms. So I think a literal translation really does serve us best here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're safer there.
Hmm.
We've seen time and time again where and it's easy to do because we see things in our day. We
Right.
know there's other signs letting us know we're close to the Lord's return. So
Hmm.
in some people's excitement, they kind of push a little too much, but
Hmm.
it's a good reminder to just be careful and let the text
Hmm.
inform our thinking, not what we're seeing going on.
Yeah.
Verse 24 is a pretty amazing one and we'll talk about this figure in a different one.
Hmm.
So I'm just going to hit on it briefly, but it says the 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom.
Hmm.
After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. Again, we'll talk about that in another episode. That's obviously talking about the Antichrist. So, but the reason I bring it up is it seems like these 10 kings have to be in place prior to the Antichrist's arising. And
Hmm.
also, we know from Second Thess 2, the restraining influence of the church has to be gone
Yeah.
before he can come on the scene. So I bring those up to kind of another teaching point is to resist playing pin the tail on the
Hmm.
Antichrist, because here it's very clear,
Yeah.
even aside from the Second Thess chapter, it's very clear here that these 10 kings have to be in place first
Yeah.
before he arises.
Yeah. And another interesting little factoid is that the idea again is that this is a revived Roman Empire. We say that over and over again because the toes and the feet come from legs. The legs of iron is the Roman Empire. This is what the Roman Empire was. It was split
Hmm.
into two separate empires, and so when you consider that and consider how Satan, like you said, I mean, he continues to try to jumpstart this thing.
Hmm.
Very interesting. When I was at the European Union headquarters here this last summer. I went there to see it, and it was very dark and very ominous and very creepy and eerie to be there. But when the European Union was first started, uh, called the European Common Market and other names that it went by, in 1956, the 6 nations came together, which is interesting, to sign a
Hmm.
document, and the name of the document signed on Capitoline Hill was called the Treaty of Rome.
Mm.
And so once again, it's like Satan's trying to get Rome again to have this Roman rule, over the world. And yet his headquarters will be in Babylon. What's a whole other thing we could talk about at the time. But yeah, so we see this, and so now then we kind of transition. Well, what else? Rather, is there anything else in Daniel though we need to address before we head on over to Revelation, Todd?
That's a good point. I mean, I think if nothing else, just what you just highlighted, that about the 10 toes and the feet come from that revived Roman Empire.
Hmm.
One other important detail is that it
Hmm.
clearly says in Daniel 2 that it's the feet are a conglomeration of of iron and clay,
Yeah.
which do not hold well together.
Yeah.
And here's the other question I get. I mentioned that I would mention that people ask me quite often um, is that talking about transhumanism?
Yeah.
There are people kind of teaching that openly right now, that
Yeah.
because there's metal and then there's clay, which is, usually associated with like Adam and flesh
Hmm.
and humanity. But I think really all it's saying when you look at the context is that it's going to be a loosely held, volatile, not like a solid unified
Yeah.
country, but it's going to be some pushback, almost like the European Union is right
Right.
now, where you have Brexit and people pulling in and out. And we find that, and we can go over some of these details later in Revelation. We actually see there are some nations that rebel against this
Hmm.
global government. So the connotation appears to me to be there's going to be this global government pushed on the world. Most of the world will go along with it, but kind of begrudgingly. Nobody likes to give up power, even if they say they do.
Yeah.
But that'll be the condition. So I think
Hmm.
that's another important component
Yeah.
that we should highlight.
I'm glad you mentioned
Yeah.
that, because when you read what the text says, what God's revealed word says, there's nothing inherent in the text that gives us any indication this is talking about some sort of technological marriage
Mhm.
between man and technology. And in fact, Klaus Schwab wrote this book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution, and he talks about trying to marry technology with humanity. Of course, obviously, if Satan could implant everybody with a chip and they could monitor us, sure, he would want to do that.
Mhm.
But that doesn't seem to be the indication, because as we've talked about in other programs, yeah, there has to be some sort of technological infrastructure in place to manage the mark of the beast. But at the same time, when you add up all of the catastrophic judgments of the tribulation period, in essence, God's going to bomb Earth back to the
Mm.
Stone Age,
Mhm.
and they're going to be returned spiritually to paganism, to worshiping actual idols
Mhm.
made of wood and gold and silver, and there's going to be a very rudimentary. There's going to be oil and wine. There's going to be swords used in battle. There's going to be a lot of rudimentary things as well. So, not saying there won't be technology or that technology won't impact the end times at all, but I do not think that the transhumanism thing is the thing that's going to take over the globe. And one of the points that Daniel makes in verse 42 of Daniel 2, he says, "And the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery. So some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle."
There's the meaning.
That's all he's saying. There's your meaning right there. It's going to be strong parts of the kingdom, weak parts of the kingdom, and that's it.
Okay.
That's what he's trying to say. So there's no hidden meaning.
Yeah.
We don't need to find 22nd century technology into this verse.
Mhm.
He's just saying some of it's going to be weak, some of it's going to be strong.
Yeah, so true. And yeah, like you said, I think early in the tribulation, yeah, technology will be full
Yeah.
tilt. If it's now the emerging technology we see now. But as you head through the tribulation, the earth just gets more and more decimated, even in
Mhm.
the first set of seal
Mhm.
judgments, as we've talked about. So even if there's some resilient technology, by the end of the
Mm.
tribulation period, it's going to be just like the earth was just decimated
Yeah.
completely, and people are just trying to survive
Mhm.
primally.
Yeah,
Um,
there's no water to drink.
right.
Grass has been burned up. People are walking around with boils on their skin.
Mhm.
It is it's a very much and what God's trying to do through all that is strip humanity of everything,
Mm,
so that humanity realizes, hey, listen, I need God.
yeah.
So that's one of the reasons for this. But again, the volatility of this
Mhm.
antichrist satanic kingdom, the 10 kings coming together. Now pivoting now to the New Testament,
Mhm.
we see some evidence for that as well, don't we?
We do. I don't know if we would jump all the way to Revelation 13. But one quick comment I wanted to make sure I mentioned. Yeah, you mentioned the Treaty of Rome,
Mhm.
and also you have what I mentioned earlier, the Club of
Club of
Rome.
Rome, yeah.
So it is so wild that, and to me, kind of letting us know that uh, Satan studies Bible prophecy too, and he sees the same
Yeah.
thing, that it's going to come out of a revived Roman Empire, and that he's very territorial, as Jeff said. So that makes total sense.
Yep.
But yeah, jumping forward to Revelation 13, unless there's another
No,
chapter you want to jump into first.
that's good.
But there we read in 13:1, then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. That's talking about the Antichrist, having 10 horns and 7 heads,
Mhm.
and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his head were blasphemous names.
Yeah.
So there's another symbolic picture there that ties directly in with the 2 chapters we just highlighted there in Daniel. Um,
Absolutely. And that's once again, it's the 10 horns, which, we saw back in Daniel.
mhm.
And it's very interesting. I mean, there's, as you've mentioned so many times, Todd, there's so many allusions to the Old Testament in the book of Revelation, which is another reason why the, the reach of God's program is geared toward the Jewish people. He wants the Jewish people to go back and to study the book of Daniel to find out what do these things mean. And of course, there's much about the character of these 10 kings because they're ruled by Antichrist.
Mhm.
And so, that's one of the things we have to really pay attention to. Over in chapter 17 of Revelation, it says, once again, how do we know these things mean these things? How do we know the 10 horns don't mean just, 10 companies
Uh-huh.
or, 10 different areas of technology? No, it says, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings.
Mm.
It's
There you
it's a
go.
direct God's directly saying, "No, don't misunderstand me."
Yep.
They refer to actual kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour, and they have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast.
Mhm.
So they were working in concert with Antichrist.
They were, and it makes sense too. That ties in with, I think it's chapter 6,
Hmm.
where it says he's given a great sword.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so they willingly give their power to him, and
Hmm.
they're bowing down to him and doing whatever he wants to do as they rule. So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's a good point. I mean, just and another maybe tool in the toolbox, so to speak.
Hmm.
If you're studying any topic when it comes to eschatology, get all the key passages lined up in the Old Testament and in
Right.
Revelation, and then just carefully observe
Yeah.
what are the details of those passages. What
Hmm.
can you learn from that? I think that will give people a lot of answers and help them come to the right
Yeah.
conclusions instead of thinking it's talking about transhumanism
Right.
or technocrats or
Yeah.
other types of rulers. So it's very
Yeah.
clear. You got to let Scripture kind of be the premier judge of what it's trying to tell us. And another fancy word, authorial intent.
Mm-hmm.
What did the author want the original reader to
Right.
understand?
Right.
In Daniel, what did he want the original readers to understand?
Hmm.
And then what would they have understood?
Yeah.
Not that we can't know more because we have the whole scriptures,
Right.
but that's an important principle as
Mhm.
well.
No, it is,
Yeah.
totally is. And that's very, very important to know what the author had intended, 'cause that's the only meaning of the passage.
Mm.
Every passage only has one meaning. It
Mhm.
doesn't have many meanings. It could have many applications, but
Mhm.
only one meaning. And so finding out what the author meant is very, very important. Now, what's also interesting too is we say, well, okay, so what does that have to do with my life? Well, we're in a season of history where this kind of globalism is being not only pushed and hoped for, but actually they're trying to make it happen.
Mhm.
And really at the very outset of the whole COVID thing, they began to be there may be calls for a global governance system. And this is the idea. Now, they don't all call for a 10 king, kingdom, but they're calling for all the nations to come together. Now, here's the thing. The more crises that we have in the world, the more the secular mind, the non-Christian mind is going to call for world peace, going to call for world nations to come together.
Mhm.
And if there's someone standing in the way of that, then they're going to try to get that person out of the way. Like if there's a person who says, no, our country is going to be our own country, we're going to be sovereign, self contained, then they're going to become the enemy of the world,
Mhm.
not the leader of the world, the enemy of the world. And it's not just our current president, it's other presidents, like I think of the guy down in Argentina who's
Mhm.
turned that country around.
Yep.
Well, he's like, no, we're our own country here. I don't want to be a part of that. So there's a great call for globalism all over the world. It's the spirit of the European Union, of the United Nations, and for countries like Israel who just want to be left alone and do their own thing, you're not playing fair with the rest of the world. They say,
Mhm.
so we got to get rid of you. So this is one reason why there are others, but one reason why so many countries and the United Nations itself hates the nation of Israel, because Israel wants to be a sovereign, standalone nation. And the rest of the world wants to keep pushing towards globalism. Now, there are others that stand in the way for other different reasons, communism, North Korea, and stuff like that. But even them that are willing to partner with other nations to
When it's
get rid of,
pragmatic.
yeah,
That's right.
whatever would pragmatic for them at the
Mhm.
moment. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, we're seeing the trend of that in our day
Mm-hmm.
like never before. People see some, I think of Trudeau, who just left Canada,
Yeah.
and others, and even Biden, and you wonder,
Mm-hmm.
how are they really that bad of a leader that
Yeah.
they're damaging their own country? That are they unintelligent?
Yeah.
No, they're both disciples of
Right.
Klaus Schwab. You've
That's
mentioned
right.
this
Yeah.
before.
That's right.
They're doing exactly what the globalists
Mm-hmm.
want to do, is to
Mm-hmm.
do away with borders and all
Yeah.
that. So all that to say, we're seeing the trend
Right.
and the want to for that in our day. Again,
Yeah.
letting us know we're deep in the fourth quarter of the end times.
Right.
Of the church age, and
Mhm.
we're just awaiting the rapture. So as we wait, we need to be confident and still stand up and push against those kind of things, and live godly lives.
Amen.
Well, what an amazing thing. One other quick question. I know
Mm.
we don't have a lot of time, but
Mm.
when do you think these 10 kings will arise? Do you think it'll be post rapture,
Yeah.
kind of in that gap period? Or do you think, because some people speculate we could see them kind of come get into place before the rapture?
Right, right, sure.
Yeah.
I think that's certainly a possibility because in a post-rapture world, there's going to be a level of confusion, chaos, panic. It's just a global panic
Mhm.
that the world has never seen before, and so it's very possible that these 10 kings, under the leadership of the man who will eventually be identified as Antichrist, will begin to coalesce immediately after the rapture.
Mhm.
Now, how solid they'll become, keep in mind they're going to be strong and brittle, but how
Yeah.
solid they become in their alliance is unknown.
Mhm.
But at some point, Antichrist will emerge as the leader of that coalition. It certainly could begin and immediately after the rapture.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense to me, because
Yeah.
some people speculate they could get in place before the rapture,
Hmm.
but I think there's enough pushback.
Yeah.
This is just speculation because we're
Mhm.
not told, but
Sure.
but in the chaos and the aftermath of the rapture, you could
Mhm.
totally see how they would come to power. And then it says he'll come up out of it. The Antichrist will come up out of it, obscurity, and
Mhm.
put down three kings. So
Yeah.
so there is a progress of how things have to happen, and that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yep.
Well, listen, we could keep going on, but we want to make sure we got a little bit of time left. We want to do a couple shout outs. Thank y'all for listening and chiming in. This one is from Blue Stars, and she says, this emotion series, this was a season we did a couple seasons ago, has been wonderful and so timely. People
Mhm.
are terrified right now, and these recent podcasts have been most helpful in giving me hope. Well, that is
Amen.
exactly on the mark what we hope that would happen. We want people to realize they can gain hope and joy and confidence as they study Bible prophecy and clarity as well.
Amen.
Well,
And Lindy says this after listening to our interview with Dr. Terry James, amazing friend. She says, "Thank you for all of this message." She says, "So thankful for your ministry." And listen, we're thankful for Terry James. He's a great friend of ours.
Yeah.
But listen, that's why we do this. And we're going to have some more guests on in some future episodes. Special guests coming up.
Oh, yeah.
I want to tell you about. But listen, that's why we do what we do, to help encourage you, to expose you to men who are of like mind, who really will encourage you in the faith and in Bible prophecy. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your encouragement. And thank you for sharing the Prophecy Pros podcast. See you next time.
God bless.
The Prophecy Pros Academy is now open for registration. This is going to bring you a next level experience with Bible and theology. Don't forget to check it out.
We're bridging the gap between Sundays and seminary. Go to theprophecypros.com right now to get more information and to register today.